I'm Edward Otto Zelke, and let's queer up gay culture. Remembering queer courage, LGBTQ plus resistance during the Holocaust. This LGBTQ plus History Month, queer historians are highlighting stories of resilience long erased from the Holocaust history. A new exhibit at the Illinois Holocaust Museum shines a light on queer victims and survivors, many of whom were women and non-binary people, not just gay men. According to Leah Rauch, the museum's educator director, quote, I think oftentimes when people talk about this history, they usually focus on cis gay men. But there is a really exciting newish field of study of scholars who are uncovering stories of people who were lesbians, bisexual, transgender, and those really untold stories. One such story is that of Fritz Kitzing, a non-binary person who survived the Sachsenhausen concentration camp after repeated arrests from gender expression and same-sex relationships. Founder Jake Newsome notes that history is full of queer and trans resistance, from Berlin's once thriving queer nightlife to those who survived against all odds. Their stories remind us LGBTQ plus people have always been their own heroes. It's so important to hear that during that time that there were people that were lesbian, trans, non-binary. I do hear a lot about, the cis gay man. And, when I was reading more about the article, the queer women had different symbols than the gay men. And
the pink triangle was for the gay men.
The pink triangles for the gay men, but it was a black triangle that was for queer women. And some of the people that they couldn't categorize, maybe that they were, brought in, they were arrested for different things. They had different symbols. So it was very lost in translation for most of us to know that this was going on because, from 1933 to 1945, there was about over 100,000 queer men that were, persecuted for this.
Wow.
And so, it's reminding that, we were there then, and we're here now. And it's more important that we are hearing those stories from, from lesbian, trans, non-binary people because, they didn't get their voices back then.
No. And, Fritz, we stand on your shoulders, dude.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? This story completely gave me chills because it reminds us that queer people have always resisted, even when survival seemed freaking impossible. I mean, Fritz survived this, being who he was, authentically. He did not pass away. Like, it's crazy,
And he lived to about 1987. He was an antique dealer here in the U.S. And that's reminiscent of like my own grandmother's story, who came from Germany. Her parents sent her over here when she was 17 years old. Had the hindsight to say, you know what, it's getting crazy here. You need to go and have a better life. So she came over here on the boat, not knowing any English, and just went to work in the factories. And I'm proud to have that, spirit in me. And it's a resilience. And that's something good that, for me, that came out of the Holocaust. And if you can say anything like that, but I'm just really I'm moved by these type of stories because I am German. And, for a long time, these type of stories would make me feel sad because, I felt like it was, a mark on my own culture. But,
see that.
Things are different now.
Right. It was moving, and I enjoyed the 19th, I think, did good reporting on this. I guess the question I would question historians on how they reported this is using modern identity terminology for people back then. Like non-binary is a little bit of a newer term.
Yes.
Queer is used in a different way now than it was used then. And I think it's important to try and figure out how people identified at the time and use those terms.
I think it might have spoke to some of those symbols that they were talking about. Sometimes when they didn't know that they were gay or straight and they didn't know how to categorize it.
Yeah, but if the person lived till 1987, I'm sure we could find records of what they identified as. Or like Sylvia Rivera is another great example of how we throw terms onto them in ways that they didn't identify. And also I think about identify as gay and queer. In 200 years, if those are not the terms that are used, still call me gay and queer. Use your terms. That's my only thing for historians. Try to figure out how people have talked about themselves.
Right, and that's important now more than ever, especially right now, which is LGBTQ History Month. This is the time that we should be learning and knowing about that. Greg?
Well, as a young gay growing up in Skokie, Illinois, surrounded by the children of Holocaust survivors, I'm grateful that the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie included an exhibit such as this one for the enlightenment of the visitors to the museum who might be there to hear stories about maybe family members or the Jewish community there. But I'm really glad that they've included that. So bravo.
Well, there is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by sharing them and subscribing to Queer News Tonight.